Marcia Show, and we're coming to you live from Barbados. And hi, good morning. This is Marcia Weeks, and you are watching the Marcia Weeks Show, and we are coming to you live from Barbados. And I'm seeing that people are already on, and we're going to ask you to share and let people know that we are on. This morning, we have a very, very, very exciting show lined up, very educational, I might add. So I'm going to ask you to share and let Barbadians know that we are on. Share it throughout the region. Actually, we are going to be live on Facebook on the Marcia Week Show Facebook page, and we are also going to be showing the rebroadcast of this program on Carib Vision Television next Sunday at 5 p.m. Next Sunday at 5 p.m. And UIC TV Jamaica, it will also be rebroadcasted there. So I'm going to ask you to share and let some people know that we are on a very important program for you this morning. And can you just let me know where you're watching from? Let me know where you're watching from. Let me know where you're watching from. Let me know what is happening this morning. Now, yes, good morning, good morning, good morning. Great to have you. Great to have you. Yes, so this morning we have with us Mr. Corey Beckles. Mr. Corey Beckles is an attorney at law, a husband and father, minister of the gospel. He owns a bachelor of laws degree and a diploma in theology. All right. And so we are very, very pleased to have Mr. Corey Beckles with us. Hi, Corey.
Hello, how are you?
Great to have you. Great to have you. And we have with us also an attorney at law. And this is, this is attorney Shirley Richards. Attorney Shirley Richards, and
Hi.
from Jamaica. And I've known her now for a number of years. And as the broadcast continue, you will hear a lot more about her. But she's been attorney, a Christian attorney, she says, for over 35 years. So she's bringing a lot of experience to us here this morning, and we're happy to have you guys. How is it going in Jamaica right now, Ms. Richards?
Fair to find. Thank you so much, Marcia, for having me. Mr. Beckles, hi. Good to be on the program. Thank you so much. Look forward to a good program.
Wonderful. Now, Mr. Richards, in Barbados, we are hearing a lot about the charter, and this has become a point of discussion because Barbados has just become a republic. And so our prime minister had said that there would be some changes to the constitution, and as such, they started, to present a charter of rights for Barbados. And I just want to share a little bit from an article from in Barbados Today. And as soon as the article is available, I will share it. Okay, so it's right here. Okay, 1 second. All right. And so the article says Barbados plans for new constitution after transition to parliamentary republic in November 2021. And it goes on further to say, it's an article by Randy Bennett on the 30th of July. Come November 30th, Barbados will complete its transition to a parliamentary republic with the swearing in of a non executive president and a new constitution to be settled on immediately after. She said while a committee would be established to lead those talks, ordinary Barbadians would also be allowed to have an input. And the she there is referring to our prime minister. That conversation will be led by the Republic Transition Advisory Committee, along with other members of civil society and the government, because there must be a charter of Barbados that is established and brought to our parliament before November 30th, such that we enter the morning of November 30th committed to the charter of Barbados that reflects the essence of who we are and what we stand for. And this was a statement given by our Prime Minister, Mia Motley. And so I want to ask you, Mr. Beckles, what is a charter? And if you could break that down for the average Barbadian, because part of this is that we want to use this show as an education. It's called We the People, as a source of education, I should say. And so I want you to talk to us. What is a charter?
Well, thank you for the question, Marcia. A charter really is a legal document that establishes rights and responsibilities. Now, if you look across the globe, you will not really see governments as Barbados has done. You will not really see a charter being resolved in Parliament that concerns the nation, but you will find governments making charters with companies, with local organizations, or you would see countries making charters with other countries in international law. But that charter or the charter generally would establish certain rights and responsibilities. Now, what I would say concerning Barbados is that the Barbadian government has said that this charter is not a legal document, but it has said that this charter contains the desires and the wishes of the Barbadian society.
Thank you, Mr. Beckles. Ms. Richards, I wanted to get your thoughts on the statement where the Barbados Prime Minister stated in Parliament that the charter is not legally binding. Should it be that we don't need to, as a citizenry, we shouldn't be concerned about this at this time?
On the contrary, I think you should be quite concerned. It seems to me that this is a document which will inform the legal document that is eventually brought within the ambit of your constitution. And so you should be very, very concerned, especially too, as I'm told, your parliament spent quite some time debating the same. So this is a document which all Barbadians should be paying close attention to. Certainly, uh, certainly it was not adopted without rationale, So this is a document which all citizens should pay close attention to. And may I just say that Christians in Barbados should remember that they are not second-class citizens, that as a citizen, irrespective of your religious belief, you have a right, and should I say an obligation, to understand what is happening to your country and to take an active role in whatever changes are planned for your country. We need to get rid of the fear, and we also need to get rid of the thinking that has been cast upon us that we are second class citizens. We reject that absolutely and totally.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you, Ms. Richards, for that, because I think there are a lot of people, especially because it has a lot of legalese to go with it, legal language, and people somehow feel like they are not competent to ask any questions or to even query anything. And what I'm hearing from you, you're saying that people, regardless of the religious persuasion, that they should speak out about this. Now, Mr. Beckles, what is there anything in that charter? I'm sure you've been over it many times. What are
Yeah.
some of the areas in the charter that concerns you?
The charter refers to discrimination, and it says that Barbados opposes discrimination in any form, all forms of discrimination. Barbadians oppose. Now, persons looking at the word discrimination will say, well, nothing is wrong with that. But when you look at how discrimination has been used in international human rights law,
Mm,
and how the interpretation of discrimination or the application of discrimination to local state laws in USA, United Kingdom, if you look at how that has been applied to restrict religious freedom, then that is a problem that I have. The
mm,
government is saying we oppose discrimination in all forms. What does that mean? Is the spoken word a form of discrimination that will be opposed? And we know that the church speaks, pastors preach, teachers teach. The church is involved in the spoken word. The church is involved in writing. The church is involved in speaking. So will the church be bridled by the plans that the government has for Barbados under this charter? So those are some of the concerns, but I'm also looking at the introduction of the terms or the words sexual orientation,
mhm,
gender, um, tolerance, inclusivity. Now, these are some words that have been placed within this charter that are strange to Barbadian society. Tolerance, inclusivity. These are not words or things that you will find on the Barbadian tongue as they speak. These are not things that you'll find in Barbadian society, but these words come from somewhere. And when you look into the international human rights law and everything concerning international human rights organizations, United Nations, just to name one, you will find these words being used: tolerance, inclusivity, that you must be inclusive. Societies must be inclusive. Societies must be tolerant. What does this mean? And these words have been used to restrict religious freedom. And my major concern is the implications of these words, the implications of the charter concerning religious freedom and concerning the freedom of persons to let Barbadians know their views on certain issues. Will our opinions, will our thoughts be censored, even though our thoughts and opinions, there are real opinions, there are our heartfelt opinions, will they be censored in this
mhm.
new Barbados?
And you mentioned words as tolerance and etc. And anybody listening, I mean, those seem like reasonable. They seem reasonable words. But let me ask Ms. Richards, based on your experience with dealing with similar issues in Jamaica, would you suggest that Barbadians and those in the legal fraternity who are concerned about the charter and the amendment of should they be concerned about if these are the words that are in the charter and these are the words or possibly could also be in the constitution, should they be concerned about this?
Mr. Beckles is dead right. And I want to commend him and Family Faith, Freedom, Dr. recognize the danger, spelled it out quite accurately. What alerted us, you see, in about 2006, 2007, what alerted us to the danger is just how Canada has changed. Now, Canada was possibly the first, or let me be careful, one of the first Commonwealth countries which adopted a Charter of Rights. And
Mm-hmm.
this was done under Pierre Trudeau. Now, if you recall, Pierre Trudeau was a very liberal gentleman. So, what happened? I remember that we had a Canadian professor, well, she later became a professor, who came and assisted us, helping us to understand how the Charter of Rights changed Canada. And it was quite an eye opening session. And it was that which helped us to understand what our country would have been in for had not certain limitations been placed on the charter. Mr. Beckles was quite right in identifying some of those red flags. May I say that even just having sexual orientation by itself, if there was nothing else, but the other words are also of concern. But sexual orientation is one of those phrases that is just loaded loaded with, can I say, in the present context, which
Mm-hmm. Yes.
would provide ammunition for a court to lead the country down a certain pathway. That pathway would see you, I don't even say ending up, but along that pathway, you would have same sex marriage. You would have a conflict in rights. Mr. Beckers is quite right in mentioning religious liberty. You'd have freedom of expression, freedom of conscience, parental rights. All of those rights would likely then be redefined within the context of the normalization of
Mm-hmm.
homosexuality, which is what the acceptance of sexual orientation does when it's placed within a document such as a charter. So, kudos to Mr. Beckers and others within the Bayesian society who have recognized the danger.
Mm. Wow. I mean, Mr. Beckles, did you, because I read it honestly. I mean, the little bit I know about it, I didn't even understand all of those implications. And I want to ask those who are watching, remember, you can ask your questions and make your comments, and we will try to get some of the questions to our guests. But on the face of it, I didn't even, I didn't see these things. And so, are you in agreement with our lawyer here from Jamaica that we need to be concerned even about parental rights and freedom of speech and so on?
Total agreement. And this discussion, these concerns, they not begin with this charter. And a foundation has been laid in Barbados and in other Caribbean countries to change society, to change the values of society, to change the norms of the society in the Caribbean. I just look at our international obligations of Barbados.
Mm-hmm.
We have the Organization of American States, and we have certain obligations. Barbados has certain obligations to the organization. And those international organizations and international treaties, and when you look at the judgments that have been coming out of the Inter-American Court on Human Rights concerning sexual orientation, concerning gender, same-sex marriage, and Barbados is bound to observe and implement these decisions. And there was a claim that was made against Barbados before the Inter-American Court on Human Rights concerning these same issues. So when you look at what has been happening, we're talking about years ago. This charter, I see it as a firm declaration by the government of Barbados that they intend to implement whatever has been coming out of the international legal arena, what has been coming out of the International American Court on Human Rights concerning sexual rights and sexual orientation and gender. I see this charter as a firm declaration that Barbados intends to implement these things within the Barbadian society. And the only way, or one of the ways, the major way to implement these things is through laws, through the law and through policy. But I just want to say, before you continue, Marcia, concerning parental rights, we have a situation in Barbados, and I believe in other countries, where parents do not necessarily know what their children are being taught on a daily basis. Yes, we have certain subjects, maths, English, but what about health and family life education? In that health and family life education topic or syllabus, what exactly are our children being taught? And this charter is purporting to say that Barbadians will believe in sexual orientation and gender tolerance, inclusivity, as I mentioned before. How will this strengthen the health and family life syllabus? How will this affect the health and family life syllabus? Um, will the health and family life syllabus change in such a way that our children must learn about these different or these alternative sexual lifestyles? Will teachers and schools be more bold in crafting their syllabus for this health and family life education? Um, and the major thing coming out of this, Marcia, is that this does not just affect Parliament and politics. It affects the entire society. It affects our children. It affects the kind of things that our children read and see in school. Um, this affects Barbados on a total general level that we have to be very vigilant in moving forward, and especially as Parliament decides to make laws to implement certain things that they have in the charter, we have to ensure that certain norms and certain values are protected in Barbados, and not just Barbados, in every Caribbean country that will be affected.
Wow. So we're establishing that there are some, what we're seeing in what the lawyers are seeing in the charter, that they're concerned about the possible future impact on human rights, on the freedom of conscience, paternal rights, religious liberty, and the idea that there should be no discrimination. That then that there are some concerns about that as well. So, Ms. Richards, the Barbadian who says, well, but it's not in the Constitution. It's not. They have not changed the Constitution. And I know I asked you this in a different way. And the reason I'm asking that is because of what I see coming through. Because they have they believe when the Prime Minister says, but don't worry about it, it's not binding. Should we be concerned now that we have become a republic and we're going to be working on the changes in the Constitution in 2022? Should this be a concern for the Barbadian citizen in terms of the Constitution?
I would rather for Mr. Beckles to take that question, but let me just say, if constitutional change is being and it is anticipated, then you have every reason to be concerned. That's firstly. Secondly, if constitutional change was not even being contemplated, The fact that the government has accepted such a document gives you every reason for concern. What Mr. Beckles said a while ago, in that this document, even if not placed within your constitution, will strengthen the hands of those who want to push certain things within the Barbadian society, particularly upon our children. There's a case, in Canada, I think a year or so ago, of a father who was sent to prison for 6 months because he refused to call his daughter by the names that, and to refer to her as in the masculine, as she wanted to be referred to. And so he was jailed. Let me tell you, these things have long range impact. And, so it is not enough to take or it is not wise. It would be foolish to think that because it's not in the Constitution, and maybe I'd say not yet, it's not in the Constitution, that one should sit back and drink sorrel. No, no, no. No, the danger is out. The danger is clear. There's a clear and present danger for all to see.
Yes. And Mr. Beckles, I'm asking now concerning the Constitution. You and I know that this year, come January, we're told that they're going to be these amendments are going to be made to the Constitution. I've just read the article from our Prime Minister, which outlines that. And so I'm asking you the question in a different way because there are people here who are saying something different. So I want in terms of the Constitution, the amendments to the Constitution, should this be of great concern to Barbadians?
Well, what will happen, Marcia, is that there will be a new constitution. So this will be an original document. So there really will be no amendments to the present constitution. There will be a new constitution. But let's look at the structure of the present constitution. We have a preamble, we have the fundamental rights and freedoms, and we also have clauses, provisions that relate to the structure of government, how government is run. Let's look at the charter. Charter has a preamble, and it mentions certain rights, fundamental rights and freedoms. It mentions how society, the relationship between persons in society, and the relationship between persons and the government. When you look at those two structures, you can see some similarities. You can see that there's certain things in the charter that will at some point in time have to be placed within the Constitution itself. The charter I see the charter as a document that contains rights, contains freedoms. I spoke before about discrimination and the words tolerance, inclusivity. These are terms that have been used to form certain international human rights documents. As using the contents of this charter, using what has gone, looking at what has gone before, there is a strong possibility that this charter will there's some elements of it will be contained in the new constitution, or it will influence the new constitution to a very great extent. We're just looking at the facts. We're just looking at the things that have been used in the charter. We're looking at the structure of the charter. We're looking at what the charter is saying. And if you're going to look at a constitution that governs the rights and the freedoms, that establishes these rights and freedoms of people in society, in the Barbadian society, there has to be something within the charter, some philosophical foundation. Because we're talking about philosophy. This charter of Barbados contains philosophies. It contains philosophies for fundamental rights and freedoms. And if your philosophy is wrong, or your philosophy has some issues with it, you're going to find yourself with a society where we don't know what is left and we don't know what is right. And everybody's one person is saying do this, the other person is saying do that, and we have a clash of rights, and there's no balance whatsoever. And this is what is has been happening in other jurisdictions, where we see persons fighting for these rights, and as soon as this person fights for their rights, and the courts tell them yes, you can have this right, we find that other rights, other fundamental rights, are being diminished, because the person who is shouting the loudest, the person who has the more financial resources, the more political influence, their 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 legal right has been elevated to a fundamental right. So the issue that I'm really getting at is that we're in a world, we're in a time, the 21st century, where legal rights are being seen as greater than the fundamental right and freedom.
Wow.
Example, religious freedom, fundamental. Every single country would, any single person, no matter what country you're from, no matter what culture, they recognize the importance of religion. They recognize the importance of the expression of your religious belief. That is fundamental. But we have a world, a 21st century world, where countries are telling persons who want to express their religious views that they cannot say certain things and they cannot do certain things because it goes against who this other person is. It goes against the rights of this other person. You're discriminating by saying what the Bible says, the Bible that you believe, and that the Bible that has been written for centuries. They're telling governments and governments and courts are telling Christians, telling persons who want to express their religious beliefs that they cannot do it. They cannot express their beliefs to the full extent of their ability because some other person does not like it. Some other person does not like hearing what you're saying. Some other person does not like seeing what you're writing in a newspaper or what you're writing on social media because it goes against their rights, their legal rights.
And these are some of the concerns where the legal rights are, are seen to be more important than the fundamental rights. Miss Richards, you have been part of the Jamaican Lawyers Christian Fellowship, which I'm going to ask you more about that towards the end. But I know that you had that group and yourself had some concerns with the Jamaica Charter of Fundamental Rights that were put forward in 2006. I think it was. What were those concerns that you have, and do you see any similarities with the present situation in Barbados?
All right, thanks. You know, there was a book written by Professor Janet Epp Buckingham called Withering Rights. Let's call it a booklet. She really described in that book, she had cases, that different court cases, and how they had been interpreted. Withering rights. Now that made us wake up. Withering rights. So that first, so the whole concept that interpretation of rights could be changed by our charter. That's one basic principle. Secondly, with whom did, when you adopt a charter, which institution has the say over the interpretation of this charter? Does final power rest with the parliament? Parliament shall make laws for the good of society. That is in our constitution, Jamaican constitution. That is in the present Barbadian constitution. Or does it rest with a judiciary? In the long run, that's some of the questions. How would this affect how would this charter affect our rights? How would it affect the institution of marriage? And I can tell you, although some of the words that Mr. Beckles has picked up were not in our charter, we realized that it was worded in such a way that it would allow some of these things, including same-sex
Mm,
marriage, to be inserted, to be it was it would give foundation for a court to eventually, maybe over a series of cases, to eventually impose same-sex marriage on the society. So a couple of things we asked the parliament to do at that time. And as I said, those words, all the words, none of the words that Mr. Beckers mentioned were or thankfully are in our charter. But it had no parameters, it had no
okay.
limitations, and we realized that in the present context with how the Canadian charter was being interpreted, that there was a lot of danger concerning the interpretation of that document. So one of the things we asked the parliament to do, and we're grateful that they accepted it, they preserve laws relating to sexual offenses. That would include the present Bogle law. They define marriage. They preserve laws preserving the status of the unborn child, and they preserve laws relating to, oh gosh, it's in terms of expression, like pornography, that type of thing, because you laws that ban that type of thing, because you recognize that when a charter is that wide, that all sorts of rights can be claimed. So thankfully,
Mhm.
the Jamaican Parliament accepted our submissions in those regards. We're grateful for that, and yet it was not as bad as what is currently being proposed, or what is currently in this charter, which is before the people of Barbados.
Wow. It's very interesting and enlightening to hear you, Miss Richards, talk about that, and to say that, you guys were able to, to convince the Parliament to take a look at it, and I know your constitution was actually amended based on what my research, and so you yourself and your organization were able to make an impact on the charter, the amending of the charter. And I
By
want
the
to,
grace of God, by the grace
by
of
the
God,
grace
by
of
the
God,
grace of God, I tell you, you look
by
back
the
and you
grace
say,
of God,
only God, only God.
I'm going to come back to talk to you about that organization, and for Mr. Beckles to talk to us about the organization here in Barbados, and to see, just how that can be used, or these organizations can be used in situations like this. But there is a message here, a question here from Marcia Brandon, and she's saying, but isn't that suppressing other people's legal rights? I think she's saying fundamental rights, suppressing other people's legal rights. How can we make it so that everyone's legitimate rights are important and recognized? Anybody, either of you want to answer that question?
Let me just say that every country, every family, every individual will have a worldview, a philosophy that leads, a philosophy that guides. So it's left to the Barbadian society to choose which philosophy, which framework, within which framework your new charter will be interpreted. You must see the dangers and choose. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem as if, well, put it this way, you must look carefully at the clash of rights that's happening in other countries. Mr. Beckles spoke about just speaking and so on, but just the very act of wearing a cross, a pendant, a cross, has been an issue in England, you know. And so you need to look carefully at what you, at those activities maybe, which you adorn with the word rights. Do you really want to, do you really want to give certain activities the adornment of the word rights? Do you really want to categorize certain things as rights? What do you want to categorize as rights? Because whatever you categorize as rights will rule the roost. You know, so you must look at the outcome and decide what you want to categorize as rights. You know, don't be unwise. Look at where these look at where these countries are now. Is that where you want to go? And Barbados must decide that for itself.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I know you have to leave very soon, Miss Richards. So, Corey, just permit me to ask her about the Jamaica Lawyers Christian Fellowship, and I want to know what is it, and I alluded to the fact that the Jamaica Lawyers and Christian Fellowship were part of helping to frame the Constitution, or to influence, probably is the right word, there, concerning the amendment of the Constitution. But what can you describe it for us, and how important is that organization to Jamaica?
Right. Well, at the time, yes, we do have a group called Lawyers Christian Fellowship. I'm no longer president, as president for a while, but it comprised and comprises Christian attorneys who are willing to stand up for the witness of Jesus Christ within the legal profession in particular, but within the nation generally. And so when we saw that, when we realized the possible implications of what was happening, we thought it was our duty to warn the nation of the pending changes. And I tell you, unlike what's happening in Barbados, this document had been sitting there for years. The process had been going on for like 13 years or something like that. It took that time. Yeah, it took that time for us to awaken, because you see, during that time, lots of changes had gone on in the world when they first started. And if we had made those submissions when the whole process had just begun, we would have been dismissed out of hand, because things were not yet apparent. It took all of that time, not only for us to awaken, and thank God we awakened just at the last minute, but it took that time for things to begin developing in other countries, in particular Canada. You know, we're able to see the impact of their charter on Canada. And so from that, we were able to learn a lesson. So thankfully, the Lawyers Christian Fellowship is still there. Now I'm more active participant in a group called Jamaica Coalition for a Healthy Society. And we have made certain things a priority within that coalition. So yeah, we're still there, and we give God thanks.
Thank you so much, Ms. Richards. So, Mr. Beckles, do we have a similar organization in Barbados?
Not officially. There is a group of Christian attorneys here in Barbados, of which I'm a part. But we will meet, discuss certain issues, and also pray. But in relation to, and if there's any assistance that other groups may need, we will do that. But not officially as the fellowship in Jamaica, as Shirley just said. But there are steps, and we have been looking at establishing an official body to respond to these issues, because these issues really are legal issues.
Yes.
The intentions and the actual actions of government in making these changes, um, they affect in a major part the law, and really the only way to advocate, or one of the major ways to advocate for the preservation, as Shirley would have mentioned, the preservation of certain values and norms in society, is through
Mm-hmm.
legal submissions to Parliament, to government. So attorneys play a very important role, before, but also as it stands now, with all of the different things that are happening in politics and happening concerning our laws, not just in Barbados. Attorneys will play a major role. But I'm hoping that the, we won't call it Christian fellowship, but the Christian attorneys, that group of Christian attorneys will be able to be more, play a major or more important role in ensuring that these norms and values in Barbados are preserved,
Mm-hmm.
Um,
and that it is the preservation is said specifically in our laws, stated specifically in our constitution, because the constitution really is the supreme law of Barbados, the supreme law of Jamaica, supreme law of Trinidad,
Right.
and the constitution really affects every other law or policy that is being made in the country, in that particular country. So whatever is placed in that constitution, it has to be. I know I saw a question concerning the legal rights, the how the constitution would affect legal rights, or if the constitution can be changed. Yes, the constitution can be changed, but the constitution is such an important document, an important legal document, that it should not be changed willy-nilly, using those terms.
Mm-hmm.
In Barbados, the constitution can only be amended in certain parts there must be a two-thirds majority of both houses, of both the House of Assembly, both Senate. In normal circumstances, you will not be able to get a two-thirds majority in every case. But in Barbados, in Barbados, the government has the majority. So it is easy to amend. It is easy to make amendments to the constitution now in Barbados, because we really don't have an opposition in parliament. So the situation in Barbados is ripe for changes. Is ripe for the parliament to make certain decisions, and they have already done that, as we see with the charter, with what is happening with the transition to a republic. We are seeing some major changes because of the political situation here in Barbados.
Yes.
mhm.
Wow. Well said. Well said, sir. I know you were saying something, Miss Richards. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to say to Barbadians that don't be fooled by thinking that all rights will be given equal equal say within the sphere of rights. What we have seen in other countries is that invariably rights relating to sexual orientation and or stroke secularism take precedence over fundamental, what one would normally regard as being fundamental human rights. So don't be fooled.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the space that exists, it doesn't allow for it doesn't allow for all philosophies. All philosophies will not be dominant, will not have the same level of influence. It will not.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't happened, and it will not happen. So
Mm-hmm.
this change will place Christian principles on the back foot. I just want Barbadians to understand that. What you thought you had, you will now have to fight for. And only by the grace of God that you will get it.
Mhm.
You know, it will place Christian principles on the back foot. Let me also make another point, maybe the last point, because I did tell you I had to go. Let me also make another point. Lawyers lawyers are essential to this whole process. And I commend Mr. Beckles, and I know there are others, in terms of seeing the danger and warning the population. They are watchmen because they have, with their
Mm,
knowledge and their expertise, they're able to read these documents and understand the implications and communicate to the ordinary man in the street the implications. That's one. But secondly, what will the people do after having had that knowledge? We would not have had the impact that we did if certain church leaders had not stood with us. I can tell you that. It was amazing to me that when we went to Parliament, Parliament was full of people. I think I remember one of the leading newspapers in our country the following day had a headline: "The church goes to Parliament." You know, when we got there, pamphlets were being distributed. People were there distributing pamphlets. Press conferences were called. You know, all sorts of things. So lawyers so lawyers are essential, but there is need for mobilization by the people who care and the people who see the danger to the society. However, even if that doesn't happen, the lawyer still has a duty and a responsibility to sound the alarm to the nation.
mm. Wow. Wow.
Thank you.
And oh my goodness. I want to ask you something, Miss Richard. You said that you had over 13 years. I don't know if Corey heard that, that their charter was up for discussion 13 years. Corey, how long was this charter presented to the public in Barbados, or Barbadian charter, this new one?
I think we had public consultations for about 4 to 5 weeks.
4 to 5 weeks. And this is why, and a show like this is so important. I know, people, they like the excitement and so on, but this show is very, very important. And I'm still going to ask you to share. Miss Richards has to go in a few minutes, but Reverend Ferdinand Nichols is coming on, and this is very important. I want to ask you something. You said something to me a couple of days ago, Miss Richards, that you asked the question: did the government of Barbados take advantage of a sick nation? And when you said it to me, I tell you, tears almost came to my eyes, because I'm thinking, if and then coupled with what you said, that your consultation, or your the charter was there for 13 years, and we had it for 4 to 5 weeks, and it is now accepted. Can you comment on that, please, Miss Richards? I'm not even sure of the question I'm asking, because it's so overwhelming.
Well, listen, I don't know that the 13 years is to be taken as being of any virtue. But what it does suggest is that a document such as this ought to be given time. You know, the people ought to be given time to understand the implications, to digest the implications, and to even, yeah, it should not be done in a hurry. Should not be a hurry come up document. And the fact is too, in terms of the COVID, really and truly, I feel it for the Barbadian people, because we all are under the threat of COVID, and that places just certain limitations on us. Firstly, COVID brings a sense of fear of the future. Full stop. COVID by itself, people are in a state of uncertainty. The big thing is, we don't know what tomorrow will bring. That's firstly. And so, with that, within that environment, ought a government to be doing all of this fundamental change within that environment? Listen to me. I have no problems with your country becoming a republic. Congratulations to you. And our government has announced plans. I can tell you, our government has since announced plans to go that way, and it has been considering that way for many, many years. Every prime minister we have had for the last 20 years has announced intentions to make Jamaica a republic. But also now our government is looking at constitutional change for next year. So maybe yourself and Mr. Beckles will have to come and help us next year, because I don't know if a similar thing will not be done in Jamaica. But I just think that such a fundamental change as a charter in particular, and maybe even a republic, I query whether all of this whether this was a good time to have done all of this with the threat of COVID hanging over our heads. And I say our because as a people, we are people of the region. We are Caribbean people. What affects one affects the other. And so I use the word our. Was this a good time for Prime Minister Mia Mottley to have introduced these changes um, to the people of Barbados? Thank you, ma'am. May I be allowed to leave?
But thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing with us and for bringing that Jamaican perspective. We're part of the Caribbean, and so it's good to hear what you guys have done. It's good to hear about the legal, the Christian association that have were there to work together on these legal issues, and you stress the importance of lawyers being able to come together and to work on these issues. And I know you have to go, and I'm just wondering, is there anything final that you want to say to the Barbadian public? And that will be it. It's such a treasure to have you, and a real blessing. Thank you so much, and we're hanging on to every word. Is there anything that you want to say before you go? And we have His Excellency Reverend Dr. Ferdinand Nichols who is going to be coming right on.
Well, may I salute His Excellency Dr. Ferdinand Nichols. I salute you, sir. Yes, I have to leave. Firstly, I just want to say that you all have the ability, the capability, and the manpower there. You have it there. And as I said before, I want to commend Mr. Beckles and others like Dr. Evelyn, who has done such a remarkable job. Faith, Family, Freedom in
Yes.
Barbados have done such a remarkable job over the last couple of years. But there's something I read this morning, and maybe I just leave it with us all. And somebody just sent this. It says, 75 years ago, during the Nuremberg trials, judges asked Hermann Göring, Hitler's right hand, how they made Germany accept all the madness. He said, the only thing a government needs to turn people into slaves is fear. If you can find something to make them afraid, you can make them do whatever you want. So that's something for us all to ponder. So our first enemy is fear. We need to fight fear. All right.
Yes. Thank you so much, Ms. Richards, and we will keep in touch.
Thank you so much for having me on your programs. Mr.
Thank you.
Beckles will be in touch. Your Excellency, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
We that was quite enlightening, Mr. Beckles, and we're happy to have His Excellency Reverend Dr. Ferdinand Nichols on, and Mr. Beckles, you have been talking about I never, as lots of the things that you have been saying, I honestly did not even associate those things with the charter. And that's why we need legal minds, and I have learned so much in this show about legal rights versus fundamental rights. And one of the things that I've learned so far is that as we look at the other societies, we're seeing that where legal rights have been become more significant than fundamental rights, and this is seem to be the trend, the precedents that we're seeing being set, and that why this is so important for us to have these discussions now, and for the public to understand the significance of the charter. It's because the Constitution is the supreme law. The supreme law of Barbados is the same for Jamaica, for Trinidad, and most of the countries in the Commonwealth, right? Canada and etc., where the Constitution is the supreme law, and we're getting ready we're getting ready for a new constitution. We have a new republic. We're going to have a new constitution, so this becomes very, very important. And with that said, someone said, I can't read. Let me search in the chat for the question or the comment. It's from a Darren, and he says Barbados is not a theocracy, he said, and which leads me to ask about something that Minister Colin Jordan, something that he said in Parliament, and I'm going to ask Mr. Nichols, to both of you, to comment on it. He spoke about the separation of church and state. This is Minister Colin Jordan. And my question is, does it mean, when we talk about separation of church and state, does it mean that the state should ignore all religious beliefs and influences when legislating? Right? So he says there should be separation of church. What does it really mean? I think the average person doesn't really understand that. What does Mr. Jordan mean about this? Corey?
Yes. I heard what Minister Jordan said concerning separation of church and state, and this is the argument that is used on several occasions to diminish the authority or the responsibilities of the church, to say anything at all concerning governance and concerning how things are being done from Parliament. But I just want to look at the Constitution, the present Constitution of Barbados, which says that Parliament must make laws for the peace, order, and good government of Barbados. Peace, order, and good government. These are the considerations that Parliament must be taken into account when they're making any laws whatsoever. Does the Bible have anything to say about order, good government, peace? Does the Bible have anything to say about how kings, how leaders should rule? Does the Bible have anything to say about how society should be ordered? Does the Bible have anything at all to say about peace? Anything at all to say about the relationship between people and the relationship between people and their leaders? The Bible has plenty to say about that. And the church has plenty to say about righteousness, justice, law. The Bible contains laws. The Bible contains information, wisdom. There's so much within the Bible that any government, no matter the foundation of the government, no matter the culture of the government, the Bible contains knowledge, wisdom that any government can use in their governance, in their making of laws. So on that foundation, we have that foundation, but we also have the responsibility of the church to God. What does God require the church to do? Does God require the church to see the government going in the wrong direction and say nothing? Does God require the church to just see the society being governed by ungodly principles and say nothing at all and just continue opening the church and it's just business as usual while society is going into the doldrums, as they say? Is that all the responsibility that God has given to the church? So when we look at these things, when we look at all of the things concerning church and concerning the responsibilities of the church, nothing to do with the fact that Christians are also citizens of Barbados, that Christians also pay taxes, that Christians also have a right to participate in civil society. So we even putting the religion and the church's responsibility aside, as an individual, the church is made up of individuals who have the right to participate in civil society. Pastors and church leaders have a responsibility to their congregation. And the things that Parliament does, the thing that government does, affects our congregations. So they come to the pastor for advice. They come to the pastor for how am I going to get through this, pastor? These are things that pastors deal with on a daily basis. So shouldn't pastors say something publicly about the things that are affecting himself and his congregation, his or her congregations? So these are the issues. So is it as much as persons may say there's separation between church and state, there is no separation between individuals and the state. The state has a responsibility to individuals, and individuals also have responsibilities to the state, and individuals can be found in the church. The things that the state does affects individuals who are also part of the church, who also have religious beliefs, who also want to express their religious beliefs, who also has a conscience. They have thoughts and opinions that need to be heard. So they just say in the church building? No. They have a right to say in public, and they have a right to influence others. They have a right to tell Parliament, tell the state, this is what I would like you to do. I would like you to uphold the sanctity of marriage. I would like you to order society in such a way that righteousness is preserved, that righteousness is observed. This is the right of the church. So the separation, that separation between church and state argument does not hold any water, in my opinion. But I know His Excellency will give us some more information about the foundation of this whole argument about church and state. But I'm just looking at it from those levels, that it holds no water whatsoever in this discussion.
Thank you so much, Mr. Beckles, and I'm so happy to have His Excellency Reverend Dr. Ferdinand Nichols with us this morning, and we're going to afternoon. And what are your thoughts about what Minister Colin Jordan is saying about the separation of church and state?
Panel, of course, I missed saying hello to Shirley, but I have been listening to the entire session since you began, and I was left to wonder why am I needed? Why am I needed on the forum? Because Corey has dealt so amicably with so much, and for those who may not be aware of it, Corey is not just an attorney at law; he's also a minister of the gospel. And congratulations, Corey, to your ascent to that position.
Thank you.
But you are equally capable of expressing the spiritual components of these things. There are a number of aspects, Marcy, if I could address that have to do with this entire matter of the separation of church and state. The first thing I want to draw your attention to, because as I have been listening, there has been a lot of focus in your presentation on the charter. And I think it's important for people to recognize. During the time, I have taken time to look through a myriad of definitions of the charter to discover that the charter actually is a foundational policy or principle, or it's what you dig out when you're building a house.
Mhm.
You excavate the foundation, you lay in your marl fill, and then you pour your slab, and then you begin to build on it. And in a sense, the charter represents that aspect upon which you are now going to build up the rest of the country's policies, laws, etc.
Correct.
And it's interesting in looking at the charter in the context of what we are currently addressing, the matter of the separation of church and state. And I want to read for you what Article 3 starts off by saying. Every Barbadian has a duty to participate in the economic, political, and social life of Barbados as an expression of active citizenship. Every Barbadian has the right to vote and run for public office in accordance with the laws of this country. So that, in essence, nobody, regardless of their religious persuasion or non religious persuasion, can be denied access to the political, social, economic development of Barbados. Nobody. Unless there are laws introduced into the Constitution that specifically address who can be denied or who can be accepted. And I believe Mr. Beckles would confer would confer with me on that. And so, to my mind, the charter, while people are saying it's not law, while I hear expressions concerning the fact that it's not law, I believe, Corey, you mentioned it had gone through the process of Parliament and it had gone through the process of Senate. I think people need to understand that once any matter transitions through those two houses of our country,
Mhm.
that they are to be taken very seriously.
Mhm.
It's not the case. I think I'd heard something, Corey, because we were on a forum before. We had heard some mention of the fact that it cannot be used in terms of a reference point or something of that matter, as it
Right.
relates to legal challenges and so forth. But I think people need to understand when something is contained within the official Gazette of Parliament, that is a very serious matter, very very serious matter, and we need to recognize that. So let's start there. The second thing I'd like to mention is that people need to be aware of how intrinsically critical the contribution of the church has been to the development of our societies on a whole. If you were to look back a little bit at the history of the church, you would discover that the church was at the forefront of the whole aspect of the value of human life. The church resisted significantly after its birth and implementation. It resisted significantly all of the sports in the Roman Colosseums and so on, to the point where the emperor blamed the church for the decline in the economics prosperity of Rome, because it had such an influence and impact that the gladiatorial and Colosseum games were literally being affected, and the revenues being generated were literally being affected because the church brought a value to human life. Again, I think there is need, as Corey has alluded to define what church is.
Mhm.
Very often, we put down church to the denominational groupings or organizational groupings. The architect of the church is neither the Catholics, the Anglicans, the Pentecostals, or any organization. The architect of the church is Jesus Christ, and he has not left that up to any single individual on the face of the earth to deal with and construct. He said he would build his church. And when you look at the original definition or meaning of the Greek word used there, I found it very interesting because it just doesn't reflect on people called out. Very often, when we have used the expression ecclesia, we have just referred to people called out. But it means much more than that. It also means a legislative assembly or persons who are selected. It was never a religious expression, it has always been a political and governmental term used in classical group Greek for a group of people who have been summoned and gathered together to govern the affairs of a city. That is the meaning of ecclesia. It does
Wow.
not have a religious setting. It has a political and a governmental setting. So for persons who are ignorant as to what the definition of the church is, that should set clearly in your mind that you cannot separate the church and the state, because the people form the state and the people form the church. And it is the
Mhm.
people who implement governmental and political policy.
Mhm.
The church has also been at the forefront of the matter of sexual morality. This is why today, if a
Mhm.
person abuses their wife, a person can be charged for committing rape with their wife. And I'm sure Corey can confer this with me again, confirm this for me again.
Mhm.
Even though you're a husband, you cannot take sexual advantage over your wife, even though she's your wife. If your wife says no and you force sexual involvement with her, she can take you to court for rape.
Mhm.
So that the church has been contributory to the morality of a society, significantly so. It has
Mhm.
also been contributory to the charity and compassion. We have offices of government today dealing with matters to do with the societal, the care of people in our society. We have organizations like the Child Care Board, which the laws regulating the treatment of children have emerged out of our biblical basis.
Mhm.
Then you have matters to do with things like modern science. I don't know how many people realize that the initial idea that the world was round did not emerge from science. There was a man who read the Bible and discovered that the scripture spoke about how the Lord sits upon the circle of the earth. And as a result of that, began to explore and examine the reality, because at one time we would have known from our history that people thought that the world was flat and that if you went too far, you would fall off the edge. I mean, that was a
Mhm.
reality. But the church brought real science to the equation. And then you also had the aspects of law, which I'm sure, again, Corey is so familiar with. And these are all things that the church has been extremely contributory to within the context of its society. And I also like to make the point, in just closing off this brief contribution to you, that not only in terms of what I've reflected on here, but in terms of persons' involvement, we have often heard it said, "Come ye out from among them and be ye separate, and touch not the unclean thing, saith the Lord, and I will receive you unto myself." As a result of that, the church as an organizational philosophy has withdrawn itself from involvement in many societal matters, which, had it not done that, maybe we would be in a different position today. There's a saying, I am sure you would recall, Marcia, that the only thing that is necessary for evil men to triumph is for good men to remain silent.
Mhm.
And as a result of this, and I also want to make the point for those people who think that I'm propagating a sacrilegious thought in terms of opposing that philosophy. Jesus himself prayed in John's Gospel, chapter 17, straight from the horse's mouth. And I often ask, how many times does Jesus have to say something for it to be law? I can understand Paul and I can understand Peter, James, and John having to say something 2 or 3 times. But when it comes to Jesus, as far as I'm concerned, he only has to say it once. And in his high priestly prayer, he prayed, I pray that you do not take them out of the world, but that you keep them from the evil one.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I really want to encourage people not to back away. We are at a critical juncture in our country, very critical. The
Mhm.
Prime Minister has indicated the intention of engaging the society on a whole from January to December of next year. And I believe it is the obligation of every single citizen in this country, regardless of their political persuasion, religious persuasion, or non religious persuasion, or whatever it is, to contribute and let their voices be heard, as the Prime Minister has invited every member of our society to contribute to the discussions on the Constitution. But
Yes.
it is clear what the articles of the Charter as the foundation is beginning to outline.
Yes. Thank you so much. Very well said. And again, learning so much about ecclesia. I had no idea about that, but it's so very, very good to hear that. One of the things that Minister Jordan said, Mr. Beckles, is that the state should not legislate morality. And that's in reference to some of the statements in the charter. And this was during the debate in Parliament where Reverend Atherley spoken so eloquently. And so what he said is that the state should not legislate morality. What are your thoughts about that statement?
Well, my question is, whose responsibility is it
Precisely.
to determine the morality of a country? The laws affect society. The laws determine values. We have a Sexual Offences Act that outlines the values of Barbados concerning sexual activity. So laws contain values, laws contain norms. It contains what the majority of society believe is right. So
Correct.
to say that it is not the responsibility of the state to legislate morality, that is not true. Parliament, as I said before, Parliament has the responsibility to make laws for peace, order, and good government. Morality, the responsibility of the state, the responsibility of Parliament is to ensure that the morals of society are preserved, protected, and the majority of the persons, the individuals in society have to inform Parliament what really are the morals of the society.
Mhm.
Parliament cannot make law, or should not make certain laws that will affect society, affect the relationship between persons, without finding out what the society believes is right and what the society believes is wrong.
Mhm.
What we have here is that Parliament makes laws, and according to the Constitution, the court, judges, are responsible for interpreting these laws. And
Mhm.
what we are having here is that judges interpret these laws. Sometimes they interpret it in ways that are not conducive to good morals. We see here in Trinidad concerning the sexual buggery or sodomy. Judges, when we're talking about challenges to these laws, buggery laws, sodomy laws, judges they're not going to bring a lot of legal arguments. They're going to bring arguments such like society has changed
Mhm.
since the 20th century, and that society is the society of Barbados, society of Trinidad are more readily accepting of this behavior. They're going to use philosophical arguments, sociological arguments, which may not necessarily be true.
Mhm.
So what I find is that Parliament is um, transferring their responsibilities to the court. What Parliament really should do is, in their laws, state specifically what they mean.
Mhm.
State specifically what this particular law means to the Barbadian society or to the Trinidadian or Jamaican society, instead of just shirking the responsibilities and allowing the judges to bring their own interpretation to what Parliament has said. And
Right.
that is a major problem I'm seeing, not just in Barbados, but in other countries. Parliament is just putting some abstract things in our laws that
Uh,
even Barbadian society, Barbadian public does not understand. And now it's
Corey,
up to judges now to bring some sort of relevance to what Parliament has placed
Yes.
in these laws.
Corey, there was an instance in the Cayman Islands. I believe it was either 2020 or 2019, just about a year or 2 years ago, pertaining to the legislative aspect of the marriage rights for LGBTQ individuals, where I think it was the Chief Justice or one of the senior judges ruled in favor of a couple that wanted to be married in the Cayman Islands, ruled in favor. It was challenged, and the challenge was upheld because it had not been established through the Legislative Assembly of the Cayman Islands, which of course, subsequent to that, it was taken to the Legislative Assembly, and the Legislative Assembly narrowly passed it, and as a result has now been implemented as law in the Cayman Islands.
Right.
I find that very often, with greatest respect to our judges and and magistrates and so on, that we are having legislative authorities implementing laws that have not been passed through Parliament. And as such, it should be and can be challenged, because we cannot have a law either interpreted or expressed in a legal framework by any court that has not been clearly outlined in the Parliament and Senate of our country as it currently stands. That is why persons can challenge the result or the order or result of a magistrate or judge on the basis of their interpretation. The same thing happens in terms of customs. When you bring things into the country, it is often thought that customs have the right to interpret. But in truth and in fact, if you look at the Customs Act, there are specific references in the Customs Act that customs officers are required to follow. And when persons who are au fait to those type of legislative positions are aware of it, they reserve the right to challenge it, and more often than not, is successful.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you all so very much for that. This is quite interesting. This is like a plate of good food. Very important. Very, very important. Now, Reverend, His Excellency, Reverend Dr. Ferdinand Nichols, what I want to know from you, what is the way forward? And I'm going to ask Corey, this is our last question for this show. I know we need a part 2 of it, but what is the way forward? Especially, we're talking about the church, but what the potential of what's in the charter seems to me that it would also affect people of other faiths, because there are people of all kinds of faiths in Barbados. And if what we're saying here is that the charter, what currently exists in the charter, has a potential to affect parental rights. I'm reading here religious freedoms, right? Human rights, freedom of conscience, the definition of marriage. You know, if what is there, it has that potential impact on people of all faiths. What is the way forward for us? What can we do? People, whether we're Rastafari, we're Hindu, we're Muslim, what are some of your suggestions of what we can do as people of faith? This is to Reverend Ferdinand.
Well, there are a number of things that I could reference, Marcia, but one of the challenges that the church has faced down through the years is the divisive nature of denominational groupings. And it has emerged very often from spiritual leaders not having the intestinal fortitude to take strong stands on positions. And let me illustrate what I mean. There's this idea that the Christian God is accommodating of all other gods or faiths. I want to put it to you that any casual reader of the Bible could never come to that conclusion. God has always made it very clear that there's a massive separation between, Hear Israel, the Lord thy God is one God, and all the others. I recently heard in one of the Republic celebration events, a minister of religion referencing a couple of things, a number of things which I felt was very disingenuous of him, not to mention the contribution that the evangelical organizations of our country have made to the landscape of Barbados. He mentioned one or two of the others. And I want to be very, very clear. If a person has a problem as a preacher, father, reverend, bishop, archbishop, whatever name you want to call yourself by, if that person has a problem with the uniqueness and sovereignty of the God that we serve, you need to find another religion to be a part of that accommodates that perspective. But Christianity does not. Jesus Christ is very clear, very, very clear. You see, we like to talk about philosophy, and we like to talk about things that don't necessarily engender division. But Jesus Christ is a divider. There's no question about this. We can sit here all day long and we could have a wonderful discussion about God and there'll be no problem. But the moment we introduce Jesus Christ, it becomes a problem. Jesus himself says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. The Apostle Peter, I think it is, reaffirms that in Acts chapter 4, verse 12, and he says, neither is there any other name given under heaven whereby we must be saved. We need to understand that Christianity is God coming down to mankind, not mankind trying to acquire divinity. But this has been from the beginning of creation. It has always been God's intention to come down. We always see him coming down, coming down, coming down. Jesus took on himself the form of a servant, came down. You find God coming down in Genesis chapter 2, coming down to fellowship with man in the garden. So the first thing we need to recognize is that there are things that have divided us. But what are the things that unite us? What are the things that bring us together? And I want to propose that when we look at matters of morality, which Mr. Colin Jordan has indicated, and I can't believe, with due respect to him as minister and in the House of Assembly, and I know Colin, and I know several of the members in the government, and I have tremendous respect for them. But it boggles my mind how anyone sitting in Parliament could even suggest that government has no right legislating morality. But the mere fact that I have to stop at a red traffic light and I cannot break it is a moral decision. The mere fact that I cannot walk into the supermarket, pick up the goods because I'm seeing hard times and walk out is a moral decision. And those are contained within the laws of Barbados. I cannot steal and get away with it. I cannot break the red light and get away with it. I cannot park in a no parking zone and get away with it. I mean, these are the things that Parliament establishes. So if the church is going to be contributory to the development going forward, I believe there's a need for us to be able to sit down, not simply as spiritual leaders, but as a diocese. And when I speak of a diocese, and I'm not speaking of just surrounding my particular assembly, I see my diocese as my country, Barbados. And I hope Corey sees it that way, even though he's a member of a different denominational grouping. I see my diocese as a part of Barbados. So I believe, especially with persons like Corey, because he did mention something which I think is important. I am not a medical expert. I am not a legal expert. My mother would tell me that I am a jack of all trades and a master of none, is probably how she would best describe me. But I believe that we need now to sit down, first of all, and be educated by persons such as Corey. And maybe it is important for the Christian leadership to suck its pride up and humble itself and allow persons such as Corey, other attorneys that deal with other aspects of constitutional law and so on, because he is correct. The Constitution is a legal document. It's not a spiritual one. Barbados is not a theocracy. It's not God's intention to have a theocracy established upon the earth right now by humanity. He's going to do that when he's ready all by himself. But I think it would be good for us to sit and listen to some of the experts in terms of this pandemic, for example. I'm not a medical professional, but I have sat at the feet of the experts and listened to what they've had to say, and subsequently have adapted particular positions relative to the pandemic and the vaccines and COVID-19 and so on. Because we need to learn. You have said that this event here today is an educational one, and my goodness, how we have learned. You know, I sat in amazement listening to what's her name, Shirley from Jamaica,
Yes.
and listening to Corey, because this is what the Republic Constitution and articles are about. It is not about David and Goliath. While there is an aspect of that, it's not about healing, and it's about how we understand the relationship between our faith and the legalities of matters that are coming in to our society. And I want to remind us as I close this aspect, that righteousness and justice are the foundations of God's throne. So what God wants are Christians who don't have their heads so high stuck in the sky concerning spirituality that they are of no fundamental earthly use. We as Christians have a responsibility to fight for and defend the rights of people to freedoms of all kinds, because the scripture tells us that when Jesus Christ sets you free, you are free indeed. And I want to remind everyone on this forum and those who may tune in the future that it is Christianity spread across the world that has brought the freedoms and liberties to every single society that it has impacted. Yes, there have been those who have used it through the slave trade and other means to justify their superiority. That is not Jesus's perspective. They are not representing him. But wherever you go upon the face of the earth, whether it be South America, Russia, Ukraine, the Baltic states, even in China, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Jakarta, Singapore, every part of the world that has been exposed to Christianity, we see a development of the society. And I believe we need to be able to allow our faith to influence what is happening, and for people like Corey to come and sit down with us as spiritual leaders.
Yes.
Teach us the aspects of this, and then allow maybe persons like himself to speak to our congregants and educate them in the context of this.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I love those practical suggestions that you are making, because I think I'm meeting Mr. Beckles for the first time. Thank you for, thank God for the lawyer in Jamaica who made the contact. And I think that a person like him, and in his capacity and the knowledge that he has, I believe that he should be in the next year, starting from now. We're not going to be dumbed down. We're going to celebrate Christmas, but we're not going to let the lights and the ham and all of that dumb us down. I think it's very, very important that in our celebration of Christ in this season, that we continue the education. And so I do agree with that. And I think your suggestions are just wonderful. Reverend Ferdinand, I think it's so important. But I want to hear from Mr. Beckles on the way forward for people of faith, because I am deliberately broadening it to involve the Rastafari, the Muslim, and everybody as of faith, because based on what you said today, sir, those people, those persons as well, those individuals will also be infringed upon. So can you give us your thoughts about the way forward?
Yes, as His Excellency said, education is the one of the most important parts of the Christian's response to what is happening. But I'll also ask those persons, those Christian individuals, let your church leader know your concerns. Let your church leader know your thoughts, what you're thinking about Barbados's implementation of the charter, the republic. Let your church leader know exactly what you're feeling. Be real with him or her. And because sometimes, yes, we sit down together in the congregation at church, we sing, we listen to the sermon, and yes, we may talk after the service about certain things, but we really don't speak about things that are happening in the society that may affect us. And we have persons within our congregations who work in the civil service, who work in the public service, and they are affected on a daily basis from decisions that are being made from leaders in society. And these things impact them and impact how they interact with their brothers and sisters in Christ. But these are things that are not spoken of, really. We come to church, but we really don't speak about these things. So I would ask Christians to let your church leaders know what you're thinking about these things, so that church leaders can now respond from a position of knowledge, and church leaders can, in their mind, they can say, well, my congregation needs me to deal with this, so I'm going to deal with it. Because if church leaders, if the congregation, in the mind of the church leader, if he or she doesn't believe that it is important to the congregation, then it will be business as usual for the church, and they will just continue to focus on their vision and their goals. But if the congregation united comes to the pastor and tells him or her, Pastor, you have to do something. We have to, what is the church's stance? I have heard this before.
Mm-hmm.
Persons have come to me and asked me, what is the church's stance on this?
Mm-hmm.
So it is a responsibility of that church leader now to respond. They have to respond in some form,
Some way.
fashion.
Yes,
So,
So
yes,
let the church
absolutely.
leader know
Absolutely.
exactly your opinions on this.
agree. That so agree with that. And you know,
Absolutely.
as we close, you know, one of the things I heard Miss Richards saying is that people of faith, that we are not second class citizens. People of faith are not second class citizens, and that people of faith, they have the right to vote. There's the same rights that are in the Constitution that governs everybody as govern people of faith. And as such, one of the rights that we have there is that right to vote. And I think that we must, I believe, you know, Reverend Ferdinand, stop thinking that because we're people of faith, we should not get involved in politics. The truth of the matter is that we get into politics every time there's an election because we vote. And we know we have the discussions in our homes, and you still look at the you know what each party is going to do, and so on. And so we, as the ecclesia, we're told, we know who we are now, that we are a governmental body, that we vote. And so it is important, as we understand this, guys. If you are a part of the faith, listen to what I'm saying to you. There is an election. It seems election is coming up. It's going to be up very, very soon. And I'm speaking directly. I'm not speaking metaphorically. I'm not speaking around anything. I am saying we have the handle. People of faith, we are not second class citizens. If we have the right to vote, I'm saying we can quietly, listen, state what it is that you have to say. We could go to the churches, and I believe we, as the good reverend says, and you know, use people like Corey Beckles, Dr. Veronica Evelyn, and Pastor Ferdinand Nichols. Bring them to your church and let them speak to the church. Let them answer the questions of the church. But at the end of the day, the decision is up to you. The change, you can make that change, because you are not a second class citizen. You have as much right to that, to the rights in the Constitution, like anybody else. Use your right to vote, and let our leaders know that. And you don't even need to shout about it. You just
No.
remind them. That's all that it is. And whoever wants to say you're playing politics, they need to understand that in order for our leaders to be elected, they need people to vote. And so as election is coming up again, understand this, people of faith, you hold the handle. Okay, very important. And just as we're going to close, Mr. Beckles, would you be able to, this show is called We the People. That's what we call this series of the Marcia Week show. And so I want you to once again just summarize to the people what is in that Constitution that they need, I mean the charter, that they need to be so careful about as it relates now to the new Constitution. What's in the charter that they need to be concerned about as it relates now to the discussions around the new charter?
Yes, there is a particular specific philosophy contained within, particularly the first article and the second article. That particular philosophy is a philosophy, it is not a Barbadian philosophy, it is an international human rights philosophy.
That's right.
And once, if you read it and you read and you see particular words such as tolerance, inclusivity, discrimination, sexual orientation, gender. When you see these terms, when you read these articles, and with the knowledge of international human rights law and international human rights philosophies, you will see a similarity. And what we have to be very cognizant of is the philosophy that underpins this charter and the philosophy that will, I believe, underpin the new constitution. And that philosophy that underpins the charter and is possible to underpin the constitution is not a philosophy that Barbados needs. It is not a philosophy that will help the development of Barbados, because we're talking about a philosophy that has been used to restrict fundamental rights and freedoms, a philosophy that has been used to restrict religious freedom, freedom of expression. So we have to be very careful moving forward that the philosophy that we see in the charter does not overwhelm the philosophy of peace, good government, and order that underpins the present constitution. We have to be very careful that Parliament does not go overboard with this new constitution, so that the contents of the fundamental rights and freedoms clauses in this new constitution do not give rights to persons that will restrict fundamental rights and freedoms of Christians, particularly Christians, but also persons who have an opinion. Because in Barbados, it is not just Christians that have an opinion about what is happening in society. We have people in the rum shop, Barbadian rum shop, that speak about the things that are happening in society. They also have opinions. So in response, yes, we are talking about in a Christian aspect, but we have to be very vigilant about how Parliament is going to word, how they're going to structure this new constitution, and the implications of the content of this new constitution. But when you look at the charter, you see that specific philosophy, and it is not a philosophy that is advantageous to persons who want to speak in public on certain issues.
Okay.
Marcia, I don't know
and
if
before you comment, you would have the
Yes.
final comment. I'm seeing here Marcia Jenkins is saying, "Let our faith determine our vote," and that is really summarizing what I said earlier. Let your faith determine your vote, and it doesn't. As I said, we don't need to make any big shout about it. Just do what we have to do. Reverend Ferdinand, again, I said the show is called We the People. And I want you to have the final comment to the people of Barbados. What are you saying? The people who have no strong opposition because of how we voted last time. What, as a minister of the religion, of a minister in the Christian, what can you say to the people of Barbados? Read this charter leading into the constitution.
Well, first of all, Marcia, just let me say that we in Barbados need to recognize that our parliamentary representatives are exactly that. They are our parliamentary representatives. They're supposed to communicate in Parliament what the people in a constituency feel. It means that as a people, when there are constituency branch meetings, we need to turn up and require of our parliamentary representatives to represent in Parliament what we feel. When persons stood and took a pledge of allegiance to Barbados, I believe it was Saturday. And this is the case whenever whenever an election is over and political members are elected to office, they take a pledge to be the servants of the people. And no sooner are they in office before they demonstrate that they're not servants, but they're masters. And people need to be reminded that the place, if you want your voice to be heard, is in your constituency office, because we need to understand that politicians only understand one thing: the vote. That is what they understand.
Correct.
And that is why the vote is so powerful, because if you come into the constituency office, express my situation or my position, and you go into Parliament to say something else, the next time you come around for my vote, I will not be giving you my vote.
Mm-hmm.
It is as simple as that. The second thing we need to pay attention to, and I'm going to call everybody in Barbados' attention to it, is the Equality Act in the United States of America. It is accessible online. You need to read it because it will form the basis of much of what is being introduced across the face of the earth. Let me illustrate just a couple of things, Marcia, before I go, pertaining to the Equality Act, because it will impact every single religious individual or non religious individual. For example, it requires all charities and adoption agencies, including those of a religious nature, not to practice sexual orientation and gender identity discrimination in their hiring and in their distribution of services. To do so will cause you to lose your charitable status. It will exclude from all political, corporate, academic, professional, and judicial hiring and appointments anyone who's not a cheerleader for all things gay and transgender. These are just a couple of the things that are contained within the Equality Act that forms the basis of what a lot of the world is going to be looking to implement in terms of their legislative. Because remember what our Governor General, now President, said: the world has spoken. The world has established this particular position, and Barbados has to comply. I don't feel so. I believe we are a sovereign country. We had a leader that said we will be friends of all and satellites of none. With due respect to all the United Nations positions, we run the affairs of Barbados, and nobody has a right to tell us what to do, not even in this pandemic. Nobody has a right to tell us what to do. And worse now that we're a republic, because now we're a republic, England cannot tell us anything, cannot impose their will or purposes upon us. And fundamentally, we are now saying we are truly a sovereign state. Well, if that's the case, Barbados needs to establish for itself what is going to be its pathway forward. And I really want to encourage every single Barbadian to get involved in this whole process, because this is what is going to impact our children, our children's children, and our children's children's children in generations to come.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mr. Beckles and Reverend Ferdinand. Thank you for being on today and for educating us, we the people. We the people. And so we're going to have our another in the series next Saturday, where we're going to be talking about some of the dangers, some of the things, well, we're calling it holes in the bucket, as it relates to us being a republic. We are already a republic, so we now have to look at what are some of the challenges that we have to brace ourselves for within this republic. And we're going to deal with that next week, Saturday at 11 a.m. on We the People. And we have a regular show on Wednesdays at 1 o'clock. So see you all again on Wednesday, and enjoy your weekend. Have a great day. Thank you, Princess Stella, Sonia Perch, Darren Grant. And Darren, so good to have you. I did, there are varying opinions here. You keep saying we're not a theocracy. I heard that, and we discussed that. Darren, everybody who's on, Dr. Veronica Evelyn, who is doing such an amazing job, and we hope to have her on one of these days. And everybody who is on, Bernard Wallace Pooler, everybody, thank you so much. And please share. People are out shopping. People are doing various things today. You can watch this again on UIC TV Jamaica or on Carib Vision on Sundays at 5 p.m. They do a rebroadcast of this of our shows, so you can see it again, or just send that Facebook link to everybody you know. People of faith, send it. It's very, very important. Once again, thank you so much for being with us today, Mr. Beckles and Reverend Ferdinand. God bless you all.
Amen. Thank you so much. God bless you.